What if the person the world calls the weakest ends up being the one destiny chooses for something extraordinary? Kora Murphy asked herself this question every morning, though she never said it aloud. She lived in a small cabin on the edge of the Colorado settlement, where the wind carried both secrets and judgment. Her sisters, Magnolia and Beth, never missed a chance to remind her she was 23 and unmarried, as if that alone was a sin in the frontier world. That Wednesday morning, the parlor of the Murphy cabin was filled with women from the settlement. Quilts lay folded on chairs, the stove burned low, and sunlight came through the lace curtains like quiet gold. Kora stood by the wall, wearing her simple cotton dress, hands clasped in front of her, trying to disappear. She wished she could be anywhere else. Magnolia, wearing her blue dress and her practiced smile, spoke loud enough for the whole room. "Some women wait too long," she said, "and then no one wants them." The ladies laughed softly. Kora pretended she didn't hear, her lips tightening as she kept her eyes on the braided rug. She wasn't weak. She was simply tired. "Hello, my dear friend. This is Jasper Ashwood, your narrator of Mountain Tales. Before we start, make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below telling me where you're tuning in from. A big hug to you all, and I hope you enjoy the story." As the afternoon sun warmed the cabin, Beth held up a newspaper clipping and giggled. "Look, Magnolia, here's another wedding announcement. At this point, even the widowers marry before Kora does." The room erupted with more laughter. Kora felt her throat tighten. She didn't cry. She never cried in front of them. Instead, she excused herself with a small bow and stepped outside. The air felt different there, cold, honest, and wide. She walked slowly to the small garden shed behind the cabin. Inside, between hanging herbs and stacked firewood, she finally let herself breathe. She rested her hands on the wooden table, steadying her shaking fingers. Why was she the only one always mocked? Why did her own mother stay silent? Kora closed her eyes. In her mind, she pictured a place far away where people spoke kindly and no one used love as a weapon. When she stepped back out, the sun was lower, turning the sky pink and gold. The settlement looked peaceful from a distance, but she knew how quickly peace could turn into whispers. That evening, the Murphy family received an invitation to a barn gathering in Pine Ridge. Magnolia and Beth were excited. Their mother said it would be a perfect chance for them to be noticed by eligible bachelors. She didn't mention Kora, as if she wasn't part of the plan. But Kora went with them anyway, wearing her gray gingham dress with small embroidery she had done herself. She tied her hair back in a low bun and wore her grandmother's locket, the only precious thing she owned. The barn was full of lanterns, music, and chatter. Couples danced on the wooden floor, while people gathered near tables of pies and warm cider. Magnolia and Beth floated around the barn like brightly colored birds, fluttering near every group of men. Kora stayed near the quilt displays, where no one paid much attention. She ran her fingers lightly over a stitched pattern that showed a lonely cabin under the moon. Something about the scene soothed her. Sadness stitched gently into cloth was easier to face than cruelty spoken aloud. Then the barn doors opened wider as a tall figure stepped inside. Jeremiah Bowmont. The Mountain Man. Everyone knew his name. He was wealthy, respected, and carried a quiet strength that made people stop talking when he passed. His black coat, gray vest, and steady posture set him apart from the rest of the crowd. But it was his silence that made him most mysterious. As he scanned the barn, his eyes fell on Kora. Not Magnolia, not Beth, Kora. Something in her stillness pulled him in, the way a soft light draws a weary traveler. Kora didn't notice him until he stood near her, his presence warm and calm like a small fire in winter. "That is a fine piece," he said in a deep voice. "But I see you're looking at it differently than most." Kora looked up slowly. She blinked, surprised someone like him spoke to someone like her. "It's the feeling it gives," she said. "Something gentle, something longing. I like when things feel true." Jeremiah nodded, as if he understood exactly what she meant. Truth is rare at gatherings like this. From across the barn, Magnolia froze. Beth's jaw dropped. "Is she speaking to him?" Magnolia hissed. There was no hatred larger than the hatred of someone who thinks something belongs to them. Kora felt her heart beat faster as Jeremiah stepped closer. "Would you let me walk with you a moment?" he asked softly. Every instinct told her this was dangerous. People would talk. Her sisters would burn with jealousy. Her mother would scold her. But inside her chest, a small spark she thought long dead flickered alive. "Yes," she whispered. They walked near the open canvas flaps where cool air touched their faces. They talked of books, quiet moments, and why silence sometimes tells more truth than words. For the first time in years, Kora felt seen. When she returned to her family, dozens of eyes followed her. Magnolia looked ready to explode. Beth turned pale. Their mother's expression was unreadable. But Jeremiah Bowmont watched her with a look that didn't belong to a stranger. It belonged to a beginning. Kora didn't know it yet, but that night was the moment everything in her life began to change. How does a single quiet moment turn into a storm that changes a woman's entire life? The morning after the Pine Ridge gathering arrived with a cold fog that wrapped the Murphy cabin like a warning. Kora woke early, her thoughts still tangled with the memory of the mountain man's calm eyes. She told herself it was nothing, a short walk, a simple talk, nothing more. But fate does not whisper unless it plans to shout. Just after breakfast, a neighbor girl arrived breathless at the Murphy doorstep. In her hand was a sealed envelope. "For Mrs. Murphy," she said, "delivered by a rider from the high country." Magnolia rushed forward, convinced the letter was meant for her. Beth leaned close with a hopeful gasp. Their mother unfolded the paper slowly, her eyes scanning the signature. The room grew still. "It is from Jeremiah Bowmont," she said. Magnolia clapped her hands. "I knew it. I absolutely knew it. He wants to court me. He must have been watching me at the gathering." Beth crossed her arms. "No, Magnolia. He spoke to me last spring. Of course he noticed me yesterday." Kora remained silent near the window, her fingers tightening around her apron. She didn't even look at her sisters. She didn't dare hope anything absurd. Their mother read aloud. "He requests permission to visit this afternoon to continue a conversation he began last night." Magnolia gasped loudly. Beth squealed. Kora's heart dropped. She barely heard anything as the parlor burst into frantic preparation. Cushions were shaken, lanterns polished. The sisters changed their dresses twice. Their mother coached them on posture and polite conversation. And then, at her mother's direction, Kora was told to wear something simple, nothing distracting. She obeyed quietly, choosing a pearl-colored dress with clean lines. She pulled her hair into a neat bun and stood near the hallway, her heart uneasy. When the black wagon finally stopped outside the cabin, the entire house fell silent. Jeremiah Bowmont entered with calm steps, dressed in a dark wool coat, his expression unreadable but respectful. Magnolia nearly tripped rushing forward. Beth fluttered behind her like a nervous bird. But Jeremiah didn't look at them. He greeted Mrs. Murphy, listened politely to Magnolia's chatter, endured Beth's forced charm, and then spoke with steady voice that cut through the parlor air. "Mrs. Murphy," he said, "may I take a short walk with Miss Kora?" Magnolia froze. Beth dropped her fan. Their mother's lips parted in shock. Kora felt everything inside her stop. Jeremiah didn't wait for approval. He simply extended his hand slightly toward Kora, enough for her to understand the request was real. She followed him outside into the small kitchen garden, where dried leaves rustled under their boots. The sky hung low and gray. Jeremiah faced her fully. A seriousness darker than the clouds lay in his eyes. "I came because I want to offer something unusual," he said. Kora gripped her hands together. "Unusual? My Aunt Sarah lives with me at the homestead. She is aging and needs company. She asked for someone gentle, someone thoughtful. I thought of you." Kora blinked. "You want me to care for her?" "Yes," he said, voice steady, "but not only for her. She stared at him, confused. Jeremiah's gaze softened. "I want to know you better, Miss Kora, not through stolen moments or rushed conversations. Through real days, real quiet, real truth." Kora's breath trembled. "This is not a common offer." "Neither are you," he answered. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared he might hear it. She wasn't used to being chosen. She wasn't used to being seen. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to decide now," he replied. "I will speak to your mother. If you accept, my homestead will be a safe place for you, a place to breathe." They returned inside, and within minutes Mrs. Murphy had agreed to everything, practically shoving Kora into a future she barely understood. In 2 days, she was leaving. Magnolia stormed to her room, slamming the door so hard the house shook. Beth cried into her handkerchief. Their mother simply nodded, pretending this was a logical arrangement, though shock flickered in her eyes. Kora didn't sleep that night. She stood at her window, watching mist settle over the settlement, wondering why she, who had been overlooked her entire life, had been chosen for something that felt too fragile to believe. 2 days later, she climbed into Jeremiah Bowmont's wagon, wearing a gray wool coat and carrying only 2 dresses, a worn poetry book, and her grandmother's locket. The trail to the mountains was long and quiet. Pine trees rose like watchful guardians, and cold air swept through the narrow path. When they reached the homestead, Kora's breath caught. It stood tall and strong, made of stone and timber, with wide windows that looked out to endless pines. It wasn't just a home, it was a world. A tall woman in black velvet appeared at the doorway. "I'm Miss Sarah Bowmont," she said with a firm but kind voice. "Welcome, my dear." Quote. Kora followed her through hallways lined with oil lamps and old portraits. Her room was simple but warm, with a fireplace and soft curtains that swayed with the breeze. That first night, Kora lay awake listening to the silence. A mountain silence. A new beginning. A dangerous beginning. For in that house lived a man who carried heavy shadows. A man who had chosen her without explanation. A man she didn't understand, but who looked at her as if she mattered. And fate never chooses without reason. What happens when the truth you've been running from finally looks you in the eyes? Kora had been at the Bowmont homestead for several weeks, and every day felt like a small step into a world she wasn't sure she deserved. Miss Sarah treated her with quiet affection. The house felt calmer. Even the garden seemed to breathe differently when she walked through it. But Jeremiah, he was a mystery wrapped in silence. He appeared in the hallways without warning. He greeted her politely but distantly at meals. Sometimes their eyes met in passing, and for a brief second, Kora felt something warm spark between them. Other times, he disappeared for hours, leaving behind only the echo of his boots on the wooden floor. Still, she felt him watching her, quietly, respectfully, painfully. One gray afternoon, rain slid down the workshop windows like thin threads of silver. Miss Sarah handed Kora a small iron key. "There's a study in the far corridor," she said. "Books no one has opened in years. Go look. Perhaps you'll find something that belongs to you." Kora went. The study smelled of pine and dust. Shelves reached the ceiling, full of journals and maps. A desk sat untouched, a thin layer of dust covering its surface. She ran her fingers over the spines of old books: frontier medicine, mountain trails, survival guides, poetry. Then she noticed a cedar cabinet whose door wasn't fully closed. Curiosity tugged at her. Inside, covered by a linen cloth, was a portrait. She lifted the cloth gently, and her breath stopped. A young woman stared back at her. Dark hair pinned carefully, deep eyes full of hidden sadness. A navy dress with lace at the collar, a pearl choker around her neck. Behind her, faint and blurred, stood the outline of a man with his back turned. Kora didn't need to ask. This was Jeremiah's late wife. A heavy ache settled in her chest. Not jealousy, grief. Someone else's grief she suddenly felt as if it were her own. "I didn't think anyone would find that." The deep voice behind her made her turn slowly. Jeremiah stood in the doorway, rainwater still clinging to his coat, his expression unreadable. Kora didn't step back. She didn't apologize. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said softly. "You didn't," he replied. His eyes went to the portrait, and something in him broke. Quietly, invisibly. He walked toward it and closed the cabinet door with a slow, deliberate motion. "Did you love her?" Kora asked, surprising herself. Jeremiah's jaw tightened. "It's a simple question," he said quietly, "but a complicated answer." Kora waited, not moving. "She was sick from the beginning," he said. "I didn't know it when I married her. Later, I stayed to protect her. I offered love she never asked for and never returned." Pain flickered across his face. "She died in this house," he whispered. "And I wasn't there. I left the night before because I couldn't watch her fade." Kora felt the weight of his confession settle between them like cold fog. Jeremiah finally looked at her. "I hope you didn't come here thinking you could replace her. No one can fill a place that doesn't belong to them." The words landed like a blow, but Kora's eyes didn't waver. "I didn't come to replace anyone," she said. "I came because you asked, nothing more." Jeremiah's expression hardened, not in anger but in fear. He turned and walked away before she could say anything else. That night, Kora lay awake staring at the ceiling. She understood him now, a man who had built walls not to keep people out, but to keep grief in. Days passed softly. Kora worked beside Miss Sarah, organized the workshop, tended to the garden. But something had shifted. When Jeremiah passed her in the hallway, he hesitated. His footsteps slowed. His eyes lingered longer than before. And yet, he didn't speak. He didn't dare. Until the day everything fell apart. Late one afternoon, the housekeeper rushed to her side. "Miss Kora, the Murphy sisters are here. They demand to see you." Kora felt her blood run cold. Magnolia and Beth stood in the main parlor, dressed in their finest clothes, expressions twisted with spite. Miss Sarah sat nearby with a stiff posture, her eyes sharp as knives. Magnolia didn't waste a second. "How convenient your stay has become, dear sister," she said with a poisonous smile. "A rich homestead, attention, a widowed mountain man. You've been busy." Beth added, "What did you tell him? That you're innocent, sweet, helpless? You fooled everyone." "I fooled no one," Kora said quietly. Magnolia stepped closer. "You think he chose you? You, the invisible one? The girl who hides in corners?" Kora didn't flinch. Miss Sarah rose. "I will not allow this in my home." Magnolia ignored her. "Tell us, Kora," she said sharply. "Did you use tears? Silence? Pathetic acts? How did you manage to trick him?" Quote. Before Kora could answer, the front door opened. Jeremiah stepped inside. His expression turned cold as winter. "Enough," he said. Magnolia turned pale. Beth froze. Jeremiah walked straight to Kora and placed himself between her and her sisters. "You will leave," he said to them. "Now, there will be no more insults under my roof." "You're choosing her over us?" Magnolia snapped. "I am protecting the peace of a woman I respect," Jeremiah replied. His voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. The room shook with it. Beth grabbed Magnolia's arm, and the sisters left in furious silence. But Kora's dignity had already been wounded. Jeremiah's protection came too late to erase the sting of their cruelty. That night, she packed her small satchel, folded her dresses carefully, and wrote a short note. Before dawn, she left the homestead in a hired wagon. She didn't wake Miss Sarah. She didn't ask Jeremiah for anything. She left because she finally understood something important. She couldn't stay where she was constantly fighting shadows she did not create. Back in the settlement, she found work teaching music to a wealthy family. She lived quietly, invisibly, building a life of her own. Until one morning, the parlor door opened, and Jeremiah Bowmont stood there, wind in his hair, regret in his eyes, heart in his hands. "I need to speak with you," he said. "You shouldn't be here," Kora whispered. "I don't care," he replied. "I came for the only woman who has mattered to me in years." He stepped closer. "You left without warning," he said, "like I meant nothing to you." "I left for myself," she answered. "Not for you." Jeremiah swallowed, his voice breaking slightly. I know I was unfair. I know I let the past speak for me, but I will not lose you to fear. Kora stared at him, her heart trembling. You don't see me as equal. You protect me, you admire me, but you still look at me from a wound, not from your heart. Jeremiah's eyes burned. Then he said the words she never expected. Kora Murphy, I want you to be my wife. Silence, heavy, fragile. Kora's breath shook, not from joy, not from fear, but from truth. And what happens, she asked, when your grief speaks louder than your love? When old wounds return? When you need me to fix what I did not break? Jeremiah stepped closer. I don't want you to fix anything, he said. I want to build something new with you. Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed firm. Then heal first, she whispered. Heal enough to love without fear. Jeremiah didn't argue, didn't beg. He bowed his head and left. Days passed quietly, until Miss Sarah arrived with a sealed letter. This, she told Kora, is the truth he didn't know how to say aloud. Kora opened it under lamplight, and Jeremiah's words cut straight through her heart. You were light before I understood you were saving me. If you never return, I'll understand. But if you ever think of me, think knowing this. I was yours, even in my silence. The next morning, Kora walked to the settlement park, hoping the fresh air would still her thoughts. When she rounded a bend, Jeremiah stood there. Rain dripping from his coat, hope shining in his eyes. He turned slowly, as if sensing her before seeing her. Kora, he breathed. She stepped toward him, her heart full and trembling. I read your letter. He moved closer, his voice shaking. Everything in it was true. And now? She whispered. Jeremiah reached out and gently touched her cheek, not claiming her, not taking her, just reaching. I see you, he said, not as a replacement, not as a shadow, as the woman I love. Kora placed her hands on his chest, feeling his heartbeat. And now, she whispered, I choose you. He pulled her into his arms under the gray sky and kissed her, a slow, sure kiss that felt like a promise sealed by the rain. A promise of a life rebuilt not on pain, but on truth. A promise between two souls who had finally stopped running. A promise that even the quietest woman, mocked and overlooked, could be the one destiny had saved for the strongest kind of love.